simple. It's powerful. But if you don't look at it, being in denial doesn't mean that you don't have a personal style. Every single person does. So once you know yourself, and your kids know themselves, because I've used this in high schools, and educators, universities around the world now are using the tool with kids that are 15 years of age or older. So once they have comprehension of the word list and how it works, they are just being transformed by understanding themselves. Now, I want to go one way, if it's okay with you, Ms. Host, is that can we go towards our definition of introversion and extroversion? Would you be open to that?
Absolutely, please do.
So when we develop our tools, when we think about the world, if I say the word extrovert, and everybody that's driving and listening, or maybe you're walking or jogging, is that you're thinking that it's this outgoing person that's high energy, very similar to you, right, Laura?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yet that is not exactly our definition. Our definition of an extrovert is somebody who wants to be in charge of the environment, wants to tell the environment what to do. They see the environment biophysically is something to be in charge of. An introvert, on the other hand, is somebody where they see the environment where I want to be careful in, I want to be cautious in. And so the stereotypical definition of an extrovert just being people-oriented and outgoing actually doesn't fit, because there are some people who are extroverted who are task-oriented. And what we mean by that's what we call our behavioral action individual. They want to be in charge, they want to do things, but they're nonverbal, they're task-oriented, but they're extroverted. So a lot of times people will tag them as introverted. They're not. They won't talk to you. They don't say anything to you. But it's not because they're fearful. It's because they don't want to. They're not interested in talking with you. And so they are completely in charge of their space. Now, here's the other side. There are some people who are listening to the show who what we call cognitive analysis. They're introverted, you're task-oriented, but you are extremely verbal. So I said, well, that really messes with people too. So where our introversion and extroversion comes from is from the reticular activating system. The people who are extroverted actually, based on the science, has fewer nerve fibers in their brain stem. And the reason being is now I can take more stimulus. I can engage the environment more. I can tell the environment. So when the red light comes up and it's 2 a.m. in your city and there's no traffic there, a red light is simply a suggestion to an extrovert. It's not, red does not mean stop. So an introvert might be more careful, more cautious, get out of their car, push the walk button at 2 o'clock, even though there's no cars around, before they proceed to go through the green light. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody here should break the law. That's not what I'm saying. It's a metaphor or a story for how we approach life. Now, one of the things we do in Why Aren't You More Like Me and in the Personal Style Indicator is that a lot of times people are categorized, oh, you're an extrovert, you're an introvert. But here's the reality. A very high percentage of population are balanced, where our introversion and extroversion is contextual. And I've done this program, this workshop, 1,000 times over the last 30 years. There's no way that anybody can convince me differently, but there are many people where finally they get a tool, they get an experience through this book, where they are honored for the complexity of who they are. They're not put in the extroverted box, they're not put in the introverted box. Many of us, we are all a blend. And that intensity level is revealed through our assessment about maybe you're really high extroversion, maybe you're really high introversion, or you could be anywhere on that continuum. The other two continuums that we use, we talk about people and task. Some people are really high people, some are really high task, and in between. And then the other one, which is unique to us, and it's our own model, called verbal and nonverbal, meaning the amount of language that a person uses. Now, I know that lots of times language has been linked to gender, but the reality is that language is linked to style as well. So if you have what we call the affective expressive, which, Laura, you have some of that, right?
Just a bit.
Just a little bit. Is that they'll want to use more words. My son is very high in that dimension as well. And so when we were coaching him, when he was studying for high school, we actually did verbal interactions with him. We would read, we would talk, and he would talk, and then he would actually fall asleep talking. And then my daughter, who is more nonverbal, more task-oriented, get out of my room, don't come into my space, I don't want you to be here. The other thing is that she's not, unless she's in the mood, she's not a person who likes to be hugged. So if you're a parent who loves hugging, and then your child doesn't hug back, then you could actually feel rejected. Well,
Right.
that's not the case at all with that individual. They just appreciate their personal space. And are you honoring that uniqueness? So I want to say this to the whole audience. Every single person that's listening is valuable. Every single person has the perfect style for you. I'm kind of into the divine intervention program, but what I mean by that is that you have the perfect style for your call, your purpose, your assignment in life. And a lot of times I don't want people to start trying to be like somebody else. Now, that doesn't mean we don't develop, because our greatest strength could become our greatest weakness. Meaning, Laura, if you only use this extroverted verbal method to interact with everybody, then you would start having this sort of divisiveness with your son. So you learn to adjust. So what we're suggesting, those of you that are listening, is we're not changing who you are, but you are using your highest level of skill to adjust your approach to intentionally build relationships with people who are different than you.
Thank you for saying that, the intentional piece. Yes, intentionally build relationships. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I'll take a breath, and you as the host can just help me out on where do you want us to go? Because you know this information from here.
I do. No, I wanted to continue along that same path. It's the intentionally choosing to build relationships, because your work is about knowing yourself, which is this personality style, knowing your passion and your purpose, and how to fulfill your passion and your purpose. Because we started off the show saying not many people are actually living their passion. And you help people, and so do I, uncover that passion. So that's kind of the first little step. Great. We figured out our passion. It's to help people. It's to whatever it is, make a widget, milk cows, create whatever it is. Find your passion. Second step is how to successfully move into that passion. And that's where I think a lot of your work through this Why Aren't You More Like Me and personal style indicator comes into play. We have our passion. Most of us need other people to either help us with our passion, to help us build it, or to work with. And unless we know who we are and who they are, we will not have a successful business relationship or personal relationship. And this book helps us determine what our personal style is and how we best communicate, like you said, in an intentional way, so we can both grow and develop. And what I mean was wanting to kind of talk about with that intentionality is, yes, I'm very verbal. Yes, I'm very energetic. I'm all of that. And through your work, I discovered something really valuable about myself.
And what was that?
That was when I ask somebody to do something, or when I want them to do something, I can talk for 10 minutes about it, and then I lose them. And then I get frustrated because they didn't do what I asked. And then I say, do you not care? What's the problem? Why didn't you do what I asked? Well, through your work, I have discovered if I want somebody who is more nonverbal, who is more task-oriented, to do that task, I have to cut the words and I have to lead with the task. The task is complete this spreadsheet. Then I can backfill with some of the information on what I want done in the spreadsheet or why it matters. But if I lead with why it matters and what I want them to do and end with, hey, create a spreadsheet, I will never have a satisfactory relationship with them or a conclusion because I have led in my personal style. I have not led with their personal style. So I am the one that's left dissatisfied.
Absolutely. And hey, I couldn't have said it better myself. When we think about individuals, and you make a very good point, a lot of times, and here's where our greatest success has been globally, organizations, companies, or teams that have everybody complete the assessment. Because it's not just the leader, it's not just the parent. Everybody needs to know themselves so that we really are equipping the global audience, the global group, language to describe self, but also to describe work. And a lot of times, Laura, what happens is that we tend to hire ourselves, or, who do we have chemistry? People who are similar to us, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking. Well, maybe I need to actually hire or have a team member who is opposite of me, who's actually quite irritating from a preference point of view, but it's what the business needs. It's what the role needs. I mean, one of our other tools, we call it the job style indicator. And what that person does is they analyze the nature of the position. So I have a job fit. So when we talk about energy, a lot of times, if we ever got into a job or a role and the job or the role didn't end up as we envisioned it, right? And here's what happens is that if everybody in the team is equipped with this language and this tool, is now I can start describing to you where my frustrations are, where there's a breakdown. And rather than seeing me as a prima donna, somebody who is like arrogant and full of myself, I'm just communicating to you, you know what, you just gave Ken these new roles or responsibilities, but that's not who he is. And here's the reality for everybody that's listening. Sometimes we get into positions where we feel guilty. We beat ourselves up because our engagement level is going down. Our motivation is going down. I believe that procrastination is actually a clue rather than a judgment, is that maybe the role and responsibility is not a fit for me. And if it's not a fit for me, then I cannot sustain my engagement. So rather than feeling guilty, I need again to be intentional and help understanding, okay, no role or job is perfect, like we talked about before. But how do I have what I'm doing, who I'm being, the majority of my preferences naturally, so I can be in the zone, in the flow, whatever word you want to use. And then what tools can I use to communicate that so I can have the people playing to their strengths? We use a statement in our workshop, developing your weaknesses is highly overrated. Now, you need to understand your style, which you do. So part of your style, when I think about the weakness side, is that expressive people don't like the word discipline, don't like the word structure. You were talking about your accountant like it was a root canal. And I get it. Yeah, I get it. I understand it. And for the audience, this is true. So there's not bad or good, but it doesn't mean that you can't do your taxes. I think the IRS would not really be all that happy if you said, listen, my style is expressive, so I don't do detailed work. That's not true. But you hired an accountant, you hire a bookkeeper, you try to offload as much of that, what you dislike doing, to those people so that you can be best served. And so that's part of that intentionality, where now all of a sudden it's not so much careers, because careers, there's tools out there called interest inventories. I'm not a big believer in them anymore because there's 40,000 job titles, plus there's thousands of entrepreneurial ventures that have no sort of framework for it. What we do is we have roles and responsibilities within opportunities, because interests, gifts, and talents are separate measures from personal style. So my preferences, you and I could have the identical personal style indicator score. One who wants to be a podcast host, another person who wants to be a neurosurgeon. It's possible.
Right.
And so my son is very expressive like you, but he's also a pilot, but he loves flying. So his discipline, yes, I'm glad that he has a checklist and he has all those things that he has before he flies. By the way, he could fly before he was legally allowed to drive on the road.
Wow.
So at 16, 17, he already was a licensed pilot. So passion was trumping some of his restrictions that he would have in his style, because he had so much interest, so much abilities or talent in that area, that's what his focus was. So for when we think about it, all of this fits together. We started this whole show talking about holistic, right? Now, I want to go a sidebar because I know we have only a few minutes left. And I want to make sure one of the other sister tools to this, and it's chapter 8 in Wired to More Like Me, is the values preference indicator.
Yeah.
So the values preference indicator is a sister tool to the personal style indicator. And I've done several workshops, even in this last month. It's always just a rock star event for anybody that comes to that workshop. And we talk about what would it be like if you could make the right decision every time? And here's what we mean by that. We believe we have what we call behavioral values. These are internal motivators. And when we don't feel fulfilled, when we are struggling, when we lack motivation. Now, if you didn't get sleep last night and you stayed up till 3 a.m., that's something different. But if I have this continuous